Julian, it's all yours, Julian.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Julian Peddle. If you don't know, really, I started in the bus industry in 1973. So it's 50 years this year, which is pretty frightening, but there we are. I've spent most of my working life running buses in a kind of diagonal line somewhere between South Manchester and Luton. And I've had diversions to Milton Keynes, Rhondda and London in the meantime. But for the last few years, as Jeff has mentioned, it's Centrebus, which has then acquired D&G. So we're now very much focused on the Midlands, North Midlands, and South Manchester, I suppose. So the title of today's meeting is The Current State of the Bus Industry. And I have to say that's a bit of a mystery at the moment. We used to have PLCs running most of the buses who used to have to produce quarterly earnings statements and accounts and things. But now that they're Stagecoach and Go Ahead are effectively private companies, they don't have to produce accounts so quickly. So the information that would have been in the public domain will still be in the public domain, but much, much later. They've got 9 months from their year end to produce accounts. So it's all a bit of a mystery. I just hope you can hear me. The screen has gone blank, but shout if you can't.
Okay here, Julian, carry on.
Okay, so it is a bit of a mystery. I mean, the big companies put out lots of press releases about whether they've been nominated for Bus Industry Awards or sent a bus to Ukraine or other exciting things, but they actually never tell you what they're actually doing, which does surprise me, particularly as there's a lot more government and state money going into the bus industry, and you'd think that a lot of that information would be publicised, but it isn't. So it's a bit of a mystery. So first I thought I'd just tell you a bit more about where we are at Centrebus, because I do know where we are in terms of passenger numbers and things. I mean, when I spoke to you last time, March 2022, that was really when we were coming out of COVID. 2 years of up and down on COVID. In fact, I would say March 22 was our first, what I would term normal month for 2 years. And it's a base we use for a number of things now. How have things changed since March 2022? So, I mean, at Centrebus, things have changed. We've changed a lot of our routes. We've acquired Arriva's depots in Cannock. They shut their Winsford depot, and we acquired most of the work from there. And we've also both taken on and dropped routes throughout the network. So when somebody asks you the question, what your passenger numbers have changed, it's actually quite a difficult question. I mean, because not one of our depots is similar to what it was 4 years ago. But what we do check on, I mean, we check on every route every month for passenger numbers, but what we are monitoring at the moment is two things, basically on routes that have not changed. So probably 50%, 60% of our network hasn't actually changed substantially in 4 years. And so looking at those routes and ignoring routes that have changed, have gone, and new routes that have come in, there are some quite interesting statistics. For most of our depots, the number of senior citizens is about 80% of pre-COVID. And that hasn't changed. I mean, obviously it went down to COVID. By the middle of 22, it was around about 80%, and it might have gone up a couple of percent, but very insignificant. One depot, we are still 60-65% of pre-COVID, so that's pretty grim. But for fare-paying passengers, so this is all fare-paying passengers, children's, adults, weeklies, monthlies and everything, we have one depot that is still down 10% on COVID, pre-COVID numbers, which is a bit sad. 5 of our 7 depots have got passenger increases of between 20 and 36%. One depot has got a passenger increase of 75%, which is staggering. Now, I don't really know why. Obviously, a lot's happened. People have come back from COVID. We've had the £2 fare scheme, and that has made an impact, but not significant. The cost of living crisis, that is obviously very significant. Perhaps people have sold their second car. Perhaps more people are in work again. I don't know. But I mean, I have never seen passenger numbers alter by that in such a short time. And of course, that is a number based on 4 years ago. So, those numbers are amazing. And when I ran the buses in Milton Keynes, in 7 years, we managed to double passenger numbers, but they didn't really start moving until year 4. Because, I mean, to get passenger numbers up, you've got to get reliability, you've got to get routes that run properly, all kinds of things. So if you're taking on, a poor network, it takes quite a long time to get it sorted, because it's not as easy as everybody thinks. To get passenger confidence back, to get your drivers in a good place. So we live in interesting times. Just to give you another statistic, if we look at a 12-month change in passenger numbers, which is September 2022 to 2023, we've got 5 depots that are increased between 12 and 20%, one that's increased in 25%, and another one that's increased in 40%, which is the same depot that over the whole period was 75% increase. So, I mean, they're very large numbers. Will it continue? Haven't got a clue. Can one see a particular reason for all this? No, not really. I mean, the depot that is actually down on pre-COVID is not particularly different to the others, but perhaps people have just lost confidence in the buses in that area and it won't get back. I mean, and also with senior citizens, the numbers are not increasing, 1 or 2%, but nothing much, because they found Ocado, they're using their cars, they don't travel so much, perhaps numerous reasons. But I don't think there's any one reason, and I don't think senior citizens are going to come back to using buses in any big numbers again, despite all the efforts that everybody's trying to make. So that's where Centrebus is. I mean, we are now we've got some confidence that the passenger numbers are up. We've got, 13 new buses on order at the moment. 7 or 8 recent second-hand buses are coming because we need to upgrade the fleet. Like everybody during COVID, we stopped buying vehicles, so the fleet has aged, and we now need to address that. Quite difficult, because the lead time on new vehicles is between 6 and 8 months. The prices have gone up 30% from pre-COVID. I mean, an Enviro, a basic Enviro now costs £209,000, which is, it's a dart. You're talking for an electric single decker, £360,000. For an electric double decker, not much change out of £500,000. So, I mean, these vehicles are expensive. I mean, obviously with electric vehicles, if we buy them through the Zebra scheme, we get some money back from the government, but the significant, we need a lot of £2 fares to pay for a £209,000 bus. It's not much different to what's happened before, but the price of vehicles has gone up, spares have gone up, tyres. The bus industry's costs have increased significantly. And vehicles are going to be a problem, particularly for small operators, because there are not many good second-hand vehicles around. And that's what many small operators go for, because the big companies also stopped buying for 2 or 3 years, their fleet aged. The stuff that they're getting rid of now is probably only fit for a one-way trip to Barnsley. And so the availability of vehicles for smaller operators is a problem. And I think it's going to be an increasing problem. And an even bigger problem is double deckers for schools, because there aren't many conventional diesels left in London. And after that, you get hybrids, which are the last vehicles you ever want to own. And so I'm not sure what, how school buses are, who use double decks, and there are a lot around the country, how they're going to get new vehicles. I mean, if you look at them now, most of them are between 15 and 20 years old. They won't go on forever. And I mean, we suffer in the bus industry just like everything else. Oh, it's 15 years old. No, we don't make the parts anymore. There's no demand. So, that's another problem, which we've never really had before. Vehicles have not really been an issue. You can always get second-hand vehicles, but not now. I mean, we struggled. We've got 7 more second-hand vehicles coming in the next few weeks, and we struggled to find them, and we're looking for plenty more. So if anybody knows of any 5-year-old, 7-year-old single decks, do please let me know, as long as they're in good condition, of course. Let's look at some of the other issues. Staffing. Staffing since COVID has been very difficult for most bus companies. A lot of our Eastern European colleagues went home. A lot of people have, effectively the number of people on the sick in the country has increased significantly, and a lot of more elderly drivers took early retirement. So we all lost quite a proportion of our workforce. And it's now only just coming right. I mean, we are tight everywhere, but at least we do have enough drivers at all depots now. But it's as it always has been in the bus industry, a very volatile situation. Drivers can leave on a week's notice. You never really know where you are, but it is coming better. I mean, and I only simply think because the rest of the economy is slowing down and shedding labour. So we are getting more. And there have been some significant pay rises in the bus industry as well. I mean, most of our staff have had 30% plus in the last 3 years. So they are ahead of inflation. I think they're ahead of most industries. And perhaps we were underpaying before, who knows? And obviously staff is a marketplace. People can go and work for anybody. They're not just bus drivers, they're employees. So we have hopefully caught up and perhaps got a bit ahead. We shall see. The big 5 are quite interesting. The differing fortunes there. As I say, it's difficult to know with some of them exactly what their finances are. First, which is still a publicly listed company, seems to be doing very well. They're increasing their margins. They do seem to have a plan. Mobico, which was National Express, are basically in dire straits. When I looked 2 or 3 years ago, I thought they were the one who would do well, because a lot of their business in Spain and America and Morocco is all contracted. And, contracted means that you are less at risk for COVID and all the other problems. But somehow their business has gone into a tailspin, and their share price has gone down to approximately a third of what it was 2 years ago. So goodness knows what's going to happen to them. I mean, in England, they've got competition from Flixbus, although Flixbus don't seem to be progressing very much. I still think National Express will win that one over time. But I think Mobico's finances don't look very sound. Go Ahead and Stagecoach, no idea really what they're doing. I mean, they're both acquiring turnover. They've been the big winners in Manchester so far. Tranche 3 in Manchester is, of course, virtually all Stagecoach's work, and it'll be interesting to see whether TfGM allows Stagecoach to have what will be 60-65% of the entire network. Again, we shall see. We're not going to know till March next year the winner or the winners, because of course you can win 1 or more depots. I'm not sure how many depots there are in Tranche 3, but there's certainly more than 1. So that'll be interesting. And then there's Arriva, who are very much tail end Charlie when it comes to the big 5. They have just announced that they're going to be sold to, I think, an American venture capitalist. Mm-hmm. So we've got another one run by an Australian venture capitalist, and another one by a German venture capitalist, I think. So that's all quite interesting. Effectively, until 2 or 3 years ago, most of the senior management in the bus industry were, the companies were British owned, and they had some connection with the deregulated market. But the new owners probably don't even understand what the deregulated market is, because it doesn't really happen anywhere else in the world. And then I think they'd be far happier with contracted routes, you know, a la London and now what's happening in Manchester. So again, you know, very much big changes. And I think they will, I mean, there's many criticism over the years about the bus bandits who ran all the big bus companies. I have a feeling that the new owners will be somewhat more ruthless, but again, we shall see. I mean, they're venture capital funds, they're only interested in a profit. They've got no real interest in any particular industry of all the things they are. And in fact, the bus industry has now ended up in the same ownership structure as the water industry. And we've heard an awful lot about the water industry in the last 12 months. So again, that's another big change. The other big change is the amount of funding we're getting from the government. I mean, obviously during COVID, there was a significant level of funding from the government, which we're very grateful for, which kept the show on the road. Since then, I mean, unfortunately, it's being done in dribs and drabs. We don't really know where we're going next. Currently, we've got 2 months funding, November and December. We promised it'll all be all right next year, but again, we don't know. So everything is very short term, but the amount of funding has gone up. I was wondering whether I gave this talk, whether HS2 might have been reinstated, but it hasn't. So the money from HS2 is now being spread around. They've already announced 150 million in extra bus subsidies for Midland and Northern local authorities. The South has missed out on that because, of course, the whole point is that HS2 was going to serve the Midlands and North, and now it's not. And it's very nice to have extra money, but I'm getting concerned that the amount of money being distributed and the ability of the industry to provide resources in terms of buses and drivers and possibly more depots is being stretched. I mean, if you take a county like Leicestershire, which has got 4 million, that's 45 extra buses. Now, I think it's going to be very difficult, A, to find the 45 buses, B, to find the 90 drivers, and C, to come up with good ideas of how to use that. We shall see. I mean, that's also going to mean, you know, in the past, most money that local authorities have got have been put into tendered services. But, I mean, to really move passenger numbers, you have got to increase frequencies on commercial routes. And a lot of that money is going to go into that. And I don't quite see how that's going to work. You know, you've got a mixture of a commercial service, commercial operator, and then the local authority is going to want to double the frequency. How is that all going to work? I mean, some counties are doing it. I've been to Norfolk a couple of times recently, and there have been some quite dramatic improvements there. But a lot of the counties are, you know, who had BSIP money. I mean, Hertfordshire's another one. I mean, we run a 907 service, which has been very successful, amazingly successful, in fact. So, you know, that's again another one of the many cases where improved services have generated passengers. But with all this money being thrown around, I have grave worries about the ability of the industry to resource it. Because again, to 2024-25, everybody knows the allocation of money. What about the year after, which will be a different government? We know we don't know. And I'm still concerned about public finances. Interest rates are going to stay high. The social care, the NHS, prisons, etc., etc. And buses are not a special case. We have now the £2 fare cap, which is a very interesting thing. I have to say, initially when it came in, I was against it because it struck me as just a political gimmick. I thought we were going to have this for 3 months, then we're going to have it for 6 months. Then I think we're going to have it for 10 months. Now we're going to have it for a year. and then we're going to have it for all of next year. And in my view, we're now going to have it forever, because whoever is the next government, whether it's Conservative or Labour, the first thing they are not going to do is put the bus fares back up again. So it might rise with inflation, as the rail fares do, or a percentage of inflation. But I think we're in for capped fares for the foreseeable future. Now, how that meshes with the commercial bus industry on the medium term, I'm not sure. Because as commercial operators, there's less and less money coming in directly from our customers. We've got less control over our finances. For instance, for the money that we get from the government, we just get for the £2 fares, we're just given a number. We've no idea how it's been calculated. And effectively, we're told by the DfT, here's your number, take it or leave it. We've taken it, and again, small operators are in a fairly invidious position, because obviously, if the large operator in their area goes into this £2 scheme, they have to. I mean, there are one or two lucky operators like Delane's and Links in North Norfolk, who basically haven't got any large operator competition and have stayed out of it. But now it's going to be there for, well, in my view, the next few years, they are going to have to think of their position. And I can understand why they've stayed out of it, because they want to keep their commercial freedom. The other thing that we are all now part of, more or less, is enhanced partnerships, bus service improvement plans. When they were announced last year, some areas got funding, about a third of them got funding. I mean, roughly £1 billion split between those who got it and the 2/3 who didn't get anything. Those who didn't get anything subsequently then have had some more funding and some more funding. But the ones who have got the funding, again, I have concerns. It's short term, because I mean, the biggest thing they actually need to do is bring in bus priorities. Bringing in bus priorities takes a long time. It's not a 1 year or a 2 year thing, probably a 5-year project to do it properly, go through the consultations, get it up and running. And then if you've got the bus lane in, you then hopefully get faster buses, you can increase the frequency. It takes years. As I mentioned about Milton Keynes, it took 4 years really, from sorting it out to really get the passenger numbers moving, because people don't just become confident in their bus service overnight. You've got to prove that it's reliable, economical, etc., etc. People are not going to change their habits. They don't want to be let down. So it's a difficult thing. So, the BSIP EP thing, which is either 2 years for the capital grants or 3 years for the subsidies, not long enough time, really. And I don't know how that's going to pan out. But, it's a whole menu of things that we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. And of course, it all depends on government's whims and government's financing. And they're stuck with the railways still losing shed loads of money. They seem to have no idea how to reduce costs. I mean, the announcement today that all the ticket offices are going to stay open is not surprising, considering the huge fuss and the impracticality of actually closing them. I mean, an utterly daft idea in the first place. But there we are. That's the government for you. I could talk about franchising at length, but I won't. It's obviously Beeline's got off ground in Manchester. What fascinates me, apart from the fact that I don't think it's a good idea, is that, I mean, franchising in Manchester is not the same as franchising in London. In London, it was done over a period. The operators owned the depots, they owned the buses, and it was done over a gradual thing. Manchester is all in one go in 3 areas. It's effectively TfGM will own the depot, or do own the depots. They own the buses. They decide on the routes, frequencies, the fares, everything. The operator effectively has got to employ the staff and maintain the buses. So what fascinates me is they have adopted exactly the same franchising scheme as the railways ran until 3 years ago, which was dropped as a complete failure. Because on the railways, effectively the government owns anything apart from the paint on the trains, and the operators run the staff, and they could at least control some of the fares there. Whereas in Manchester, they can't control any fares. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, I'm happy to predict that every metropolitan area will be franchised in the next 3 or 4 years. You know, it's all about giving power to politicians, and they're not going to turn it down. And that includes the West Midlands. Even if it's a Conservative mayor, he's not going to be the one who's different to everybody else, I'm afraid. So franchising will come to all of the areas. Whether it'll come to any areas outside that, I don't know. I mean, I've just seen the detailed Cambridgeshire franchising plan, and in that, they're going to leave the depots with the operators. So that basically means the only person who can actually run in Cambridgeshire in any large numbers is Stagecoach, because nobody else can get a 100 bus depot up and running in 8 months. It's absolutely impossible. So they haven't really thought that one through. But you know, other areas will no doubt look at it. If they've got any sense, they'll leave Manchester running to 2 or 3 years and see how it works. But they won't, of course. Liverpool will do it soon. West Yorkshire will do it soon. South Yorkshire's well on the way. The West Midlands might be the last one, but they'll all go in that direction. So I think that's half an hour, perhaps a bit over. And that's really my slightly jaundiced view of the current state of the bus industry. I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Julian. We'll take questions. I feel quite depressed actually, but rather glad I'm now retired from the bus industry. It seems.
Oh no, I wouldn't be depressed. I mean, if you look at the passenger numbers that I've quoted, you know, it's quite amazing. I don't know what everybody else is doing, but I don't see why they should be fundamentally different from where we are.
No, that as you say, that's extremely good news. Although you can't actually bottom out why in particular cases. That's one of the issues, isn't it?
Well, to be honest, that doesn't really worry me. You know, if they come,
it's fine, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
the other issue,
yeah.
Before I open up generally, the other issue is depression is largely due to me being a Mobico shareholder, I think. And I think I agree with your summing up of the former National Express Group. It's what happens, isn't it, when you take 2 or 3 good busmen, such as we've known in our careers, Julian, cast them aside and bring in people from not just from the UK, but from abroad who haven't dealt with this type of industry. Comment?
Well, I think Mobico's problems are much greater than that. I mean, to be fair, National Express West Midlands, until 18 months, 2 years ago, seemed to be really going in the right direction. I mean, their fleet, everything in the West Midlands has improved dramatically, in my view, over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be a tatty operation. It certainly isn't now. But somehow, in the last 2 years, the finances have just gone to pot. And obviously, the very big pay rises and the strike haven't helped. And I don't really understand what's gone wrong. But I think Mobico's problems are much bigger. But I'm sure in the not too distant future, there will be an offer for Mobico's shares, probably from the Cosmans or somebody else. It can't stay as it is.
Yeah, I'd have thought the Cosmans would be interested in taking it over. Alsa seems to be working quite well, doesn't it, in Spain and Northern Africa. But anyway, enough of that.
I mean, even more radical, I would suggest that they won't be in the UK much longer.
Yeah, quite. It's a good
because it's a small operation now. It's a small part of their business.
Yeah, not only that, but there's no. I mean, it's isolated, isn't it? In the sense, National Express.
Yes.
There's no issues about competition of any sort, really. Okay, parochial stuff. Sorry about that, gents. I'm going to throw it open now to questions. Thanks, Julian. That's great. I'm glad we can bombard you with some, and I hope they're ready. Can you, gentlemen, please raise your electronic hands by pressing its reactions on your toolbar, and I can pick you off then from the for example, I've got Lewis Richards there straight away. So can you do that as you got a question ready? Put your hand up, and I've got you on the screen. So without any more ado, Lewis Richards, over to you.
Yes, I've got a question. What do you think of the if the bus franchise comes into the West Midlands? How would it pan out? Because a lot we see up in Manchester, it's a bit of a mess at the moment.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Manchester's only been running for a few weeks, and it's bound to be a mess. I mean, to me, it's a mad way of doing it. A bus depot is an ecosystem, and it takes a long time to build that ecosystem up. Drivers, engineers, management, etc., etc. And the way they're doing it, it destroys that ecosystem. Because if you lose a franchise, if you lose one of the depots at the moment, you're going to take your good management with you. You're going to take the best buses with you, etc., etc. So how it will, I mean, for instance, franchising can work in different ways. The London way was leave everything with the operators and do it route at a time. So that, and there are probably several other ways of doing it as well. So the West Midlands doesn't necessarily have to follow that model.
Although one of the benefits in West Midlands is quite large groups of buses on single routes, which is a bit more akin to London than Manchester. So who knows?
Yes, but of course you've got the depot issue. Where are you going to run them from?
Yeah.
I mean, West Midlands, they've got rid of 2 more depots, haven't they, fairly recently? So the number of depots is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, they're pretty full too.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. I can't see any other hands up. Yes, I can. Steve. Good evening, Steve. Over to you. Steve Sellers.
Thank you, Jeff. Sorry, fumbling with my electronic hand here.
Well done.
Thank you, Julian. Fascinating presentation as ever. Going back to £2 fare, I was interested in your comments on that and the fact that we're likely to see that continuing because of the political unacceptability, as you put it, of discontinuing that. Is there a transition from that over the longer term, or is it, as you said, that you see it's probably a permanent feature now with some sort of inflation linking to it in future? Because it's been quite a good sell of the bus industry to the wider public, I suppose, and the simplicity aspects of it, but perhaps not with everybody participating in it, as we've maybe lost some of the ability to push this any bus anywhere £2 message, do you feel?
No, I don't think it matters that some people are out. I mean, buses are a very local thing. The fact that, some operators in Lincolnshire and Norfolk and a few others aren't in it, frankly, doesn't matter. I mean, it's a very local thing. We can sell it to our customers. This is one of the things the PLCs never got. The passengers couldn't care less about a Reaver or First or Stagecoach. It's who runs my local bus. And they've all lost that. I mean, Stagecoach with its ghastly new livery and things, and all these, corporate liveries. The passengers are not interested. They really aren't. I mean, to me, the £2 fare is now just like the free bus pass. I mean, it was brought in by Gordon Brown in 2015 when he thought that the old grannies weren't going to vote for him. It was rushed in, and now nobody dares get rid of it when it's not really serving any purpose. The fact that we're only carrying 80% of pre-COVID pensioners suggests to me that it's not a vital thing for a lot of people. It could easily be replaced by, say, a 50p flat fare, which would halve the cost of it roughly. Because, I mean, if you take £2, the bus industry only gets £1 for every pensioner it carries. So, it would be a significant saving for the government. Concessions are roughly £1 billion business, so it would be £500 million. But nobody dare do it. And I'm quite convinced that with a £2 fare, nobody will dare say, no, that's it, it's all going back. So it's, 14 quid to Bridlington from Leeds now. It's just not going to happen. They're not brave enough.
It's the straight politics of it, never mind anything else. Yes.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it is a good thing. It is going to give us more passengers. And I think over the long term, I mean, it could go up with inflation like rail fares, so you know, 210, 220. But I mean, that's an irrelevance really, because it'll still be effectively the £2 fare as general costs have gone up. And it could over time have a very significant effect on passenger numbers. So I mean, as I say, I first saw it as a gimmick. Now, if we're going to have it for the long term, then, and of course, you know, this government can't say to the next government what they're going to do. But as I say, my bet is in 6 years' time, we'll still have the equivalent.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Just a rider on that. Do you think, Julian, enough has been made of that by the government in terms of publicity? I mean, there hasn't been any, as far as I know, nationally. It's been left to operators.
Sorry?
It's been left to operators, really, hasn't it, to publicise, or indeed not in some cases, the £2 fare. Shouldn't government have done something about this? It seems to be good news in government terms.
Well, it is. I mean, there's the green and yellow, you know, things about it. But I mean, we're pretty good at telling our customers.
Yeah, I noticed that, yeah.
It took them about, you know, 2 days to work out.
Yeah.
And I mean, for instance, in Stoke, we've got even cheaper weekly fares now. People don't need, you know, telling for very long. People pick things up, and with social media now, etc., local radio, the word gets around very quickly. Buses are more high profile than people in urban areas anyway, than people realise.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. Right, looking at my list, I've got Richard Delahoy. Good evening. Over to you.
Yeah, good evening. And Julian, thanks very much for a very interesting view of where things are. Coming back to the franchising situation, what's the position for smaller operators who are on the fringes of a franchise area? Are they just going to be collateral damage? And I'm thinking here perhaps of someone like Vision on the edge of Manchester, who seem to have built up a good business and have had a lot of it lost overnight.
Yeah, I think collateral damage is a very good way of putting it. I mean, if you take Manchester, they had to include small operators franchises within it, because otherwise the small operators would have had a good case to go to the High Court and say, well, you know, my business is being taken away and I have no opportunity in the future. But so by leaving it in, but of course, everything in Manchester is incredibly complicated with vast levels of bureaucracy, and it's basically impossible for small operators to do it. I mean, Vision has kept a batch of school buses, and I presume the tendering for those is fairly simple. But I mean, there are other school operators in Manchester who are going to lose all their work as well. So, I mean, it's very good news for the PLCs and very bad news for the private operators. And it's also, for instance, going to be interesting to see what happens with cross-boundary. If you remember, in London, many cross-boundary routes disappeared because the funding in the, you know, within London, well, they just weren't interested in funding it, and they were excluded from the travel card schemes, etc. And I can see that position being made quite difficult for operators like ourselves who run the 199 from Derby, from Buxton into Manchester. But we shall see.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Very good. Good evening, Roger French. Over to you, please.
Hi, Julian. Isn't the problem with the £2 fare going forward that it limits your costs, isn't it? Because, as you say, you're not quite sure why how the DfT come up with the money they're reimbursing you. But if that's fixing your revenue effectively, aside from any growth in the £2 effect, which is going to, I suspect, finish soon because people have got used to it. And then, therefore, when your trade union comes along and says they want another 10% pay increase, you're not going to be able to afford it because you're cash limited by the DfT's reimbursement, aren't you? Or am I missing something?
No, you're not missing anything. I mean, effectively, we don't know we are told we are going to get an allocation for January to December next year. So we have a bit of certainty. And again, it'll be a number which we don't know how it's being calculated. But you're quite right. Effectively, our concessions are fixed. Our tender money is fixed. Our cash money is fixed. We may get some more growth in numbers of £2 passengers, I don't know. But effectively, our income is being fixed by the government for 12 months. And as you say, when your Unite man comes along and wants a pay rise, that's still going to be very interesting. And the price of spares go up, and ADL stick the price of vehicles up, etc., etc., etc. So I actually think financially we could be walking into a bit of a minefield. And of course, if you fix the operator's revenue, and his costs are his costs, the only thing he can do is flex his service levels. And I don't really think the government's thought that through. I mean, they are now saying to us that they are going to change the concessionary reimbursement from April. And it won't be we'll get any more, it will get less. So how you can fix cash fares, cash income, and change that, I don't quite understand. Unfortunately, the people at the DfT, it's not they don't understand bus economics, they don't understand any economics. So I think that is a big risk for 2024.
I think it's an existential risk for the whole industry, personally, because I think the DfT are going to end up controlling the industry through
they are.
reinvestment.
And I don't see how the commercial model and the fixed income work.
No, I agree with you.
I think there is there needs to be a very fundamental change.
Yeah. Thank you.
Watch this space. I have some thoughts on it.
Do you want to share them now, Julian?
No. I haven't quite finished it needs one or two more kinks taking out of it.
Yeah, okay,
I think basically we've virtually got to start from scratch again on the regulatory framework.
Yes, I think your remarks about franchising in West Mids follow on from that, don't they? How can they survive in that climate?
Well, I would suggest they'd win most of the franchises, actually.
Well, yeah, if it's framed, it depends who the mayor is, doesn't it, I suppose? But if it's framed to suit them, yes, they would, wouldn't they? We're talking about very large garages. So who knows? Could be a few years off yet, though, because I think there's every chance that Andy Street would get re-elected if indeed he decided to stand.
But don't forget, most of the councils in Birmingham are Labour.
Well, yeah, even Birmingham.
And don't forget it's the count. Well, except you've got the mayor as the leader. All those councillors are going to be told by everybody in Manchester and Liverpool and wherever else how wonderful this franchising is. Now they've got control over the buses. Everything's going to be fine.
Of course they are. Yeah, exactly. Yes, they're all the members of the combined authority are, as you say, nearly all of them are Labour councillors from the.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
No.
I mean, I'm not as anti-franchising as I was, because I actually think the way we're all going, perhaps that is the only way.
Yeah, we've had to change, haven't we? We've had to change our views. I mean, don't forget, a couple of groups went to court only 2 years ago. Things have changed a bit. Okay, Lewis, are you back for another bash? Are you? Is that your hand up?
I am, yes.
Go on then, off you go.
I've got another question. I've been to Blackpool a couple of times, and the buses seem a bit different over here to the West Midlands, obviously. What would your opinion will be if Blackpool Transport will be franchised like with Stagecoach when they do like 42 to Lancaster from Blackpool and a 68 up to Blackpool up to Preston? What's your thoughts on about that, Julian?
I really can't comment. I mean, if it was a franchise area, Blackpool Borough is a unitary, Lancashire is something separate. I really don't know how that would work. I mean, that's why, in one way, I don't see franchising really being any kind of success outside the metropolitan areas. And of course, in Blackpool, you've got the problem of the trams as well.
Okay, listen.
Hi, Jeff. I'm afraid I haven't got my digital hand to hand, so I'm using my real one.
Go ahead, Derek, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Julian. I'm interested in your comments about enhanced partnerships and bus priority. I'm in Kent, where we've got Fast Track, which it's now public knowledge that Go Ahead will be taking over from Arriva in November 24. The Fast Track services are the only area of Kent at the moment where we've had passenger growth beyond what the pre-COVID situation. I think it's standing at just above 100% now, which is well above the average, which, as you said earlier, we're fairly typical, about 80% of pre-COVID. I just wondered how much of your successful passenger growth is in areas where there's new development to report, because I think that's possibly one of the major factors, depending on how the new development is designed.
If you're by new development, you mean new housing estates, the answer is none. All these figures I'm quoting are existing routes that basically haven't changed.
Right.
So
and then that includes the 75%, does it?
Yeah.
Right.
That the route, I mean, that depot has changed a lot, but
Yeah.
that figure is the core routes that haven't altered.
I see.
Which of that depot are, that is only probably a third of the routes, but basically for some reason, people are using more. I mean, I'm amazed if you say that Kent is only at, and again, let's ignore senior citizens. If they're only 80% of pre-COVID, I'm amazed. I can't see why we've got so many and they haven't.
I think, I mean, that figure's a little out of date, but it is, I think, still keeping on a level rather than growing any further. And I think our concessions are around about 50 to 60%. It's no higher than that. So there is definitely a lower use by concessions these days.
I'm glad I don't run buses in Kent then.
Yeah, well,
because I mean, their finances are going to be grim, and they're not going to get any of the HS2 money either.
No, I mean the whole problem with the BSIP and whatever's come after it is that it's all time limited, and there's no sustainability for the funding. I mean, local governments always had to cope with this annual sort of guillotine on funding, that you can't carry it forward indefinitely. And with the latest schemes, it's just got worse and worse, because there's no guarantee that funding. I mean, we in Kent, we're using quite a large proportion of the BSIP money on school services, and if that money doesn't carry on, those school services will either have to become commercial or won't survive.
And then you've got the £2 fare, making it even more complicated.
Indeed. Anyway, thanks very much for some interesting talking points.
Derek. Regards to Kent, I've got a list now coming up. John Hardy, are you there? If you are, unmute and fire away.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if in a franchised environment, it wouldn't be better if the franchising authority actually employed the drivers and ran it as their own company, especially when they're now owning the vehicles and owning the depots. Any thoughts on that, please?
Well, I mean, one of the arguments for the last 40 years has been about municipal operators, and I can see absolutely no reason why there can't be new municipal operators. I'm not convinced that it's a good idea, but I don't see why they shouldn't have a go. And as you say, in Manchester, as they do everything else, why not just, it becomes Manchester City Transport again? I can see no good reason for that not to happen. I mean, at the moment it can't happen because George Osborne wouldn't use the word nationalisation, which is what it should be. And so we come up with this ludicrous word franchising, which is in fact nationalisation without compensation and is illegal under EU law, but that's another issue. Yes, why don't they go whole hog and just run the lot themselves? I quite agree. I see no reason why they shouldn't.
Yes, and in theory, there wouldn't be third-party operators taking profits and handing them over to venture capitalists.
Yes, but I mean, municipal operators are not necessarily the most efficient in the world. I mean, one of the things that in Manchester might look very good, but nobody's going to tell us the real costs of how they've got there. I mean, they've had, vast numbers of buses drafted in, 200 extra drivers, half of which are agency drivers on something like £21 an hour. The cost will have gone through the roof. And now, all right, in time, that'll probably sort itself out. But, municipals, the reason the government doesn't want municipals because it thinks it loses control of them, on costs. But as I say, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't go the whole hog.
Okay, thanks, John. Coming up to David Button. Good evening. You. That's
Good
right.
evening.
Good.
We were talking about OAPs not coming back to the buses. And being one of them myself, as a lot of people are, one of the reasons given to me by my friends, colleagues, family, who are OAPs, is that they're still very frightened of getting on the bus because of COVID. And that reaction is still there. And I'm not sure how to get over that.
No, I agree. Not only have they found Ocado, but they think getting on a bus will kill them.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's crazy. I mean, one of the interesting things during COVID, when of course it started, nobody knew anything about it. So we provided our drivers with masks, screens, gel, you name it, it's all there. Take it, leave it. In fact, the number of drivers who caught COVID was minimal, absolutely minimal. And in fact, I reckon a bus is about the safest place to be, simply because you have an airflow going through it. So that particularly with the driver at the front, the air is going back. So I think buses and public transport in general is actually a very safe place to be. And the most dangerous place to be is at home.
Yeah, interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it? Again, there's something perhaps the government could have done, because they were the ones, first of all, who said, don't travel by bus.
Don't travel, exactly.
Use, under no circumstances travel by bus. So where's the sort of reverse of that coming?
Yeah, but again, to be fair to them, nobody knew. Nobody knew at the beginning of it. That's why this COVID inquiry is a complete waste of time. But I have every sympathy for them. Nobody knew.
I tell you what, though, it makes very good viewing, doesn't it? Never mind whether it's worthwhile or not.
Like bear baiting.
Good evening, Peter Hale. Your question, please.
Right, hello. Hello, everybody. It's not, well, one thing that's been quite interesting to see in the past 18 months or so has been independents selling out to major one or two selling out to major groups. We've seen at least one independent who's given up bus operation, and I think that the prospect of having to use electric buses might have been one of the factors. In addition, of course, to possibly an increased rate of independent operators going to the wall. Do you think that this is going to continue as time goes on, especially with electric buses or whatever increasingly on the horizon?
I don't see any reason. I mean, effectively, independence will. I mean, there is a phenomenal opportunity for independence. I mean, for instance, I mentioned, say, Leicestershire, 45 extra buses going on the road. If they spend it sensibly, well, independents can pick some of that up. I mean, the electric bus thing is a complete red herring. For instance, people forget that technology moves on. You can now effectively have 4 electric buses in your depot plugged into the mains. You don't need anything particularly complicated. So it's no more different. If you go to like Leicester or something like that, you can, with a whole depot, you have got to have all the kit. But for small numbers of electric buses, it's not particularly difficult. And in another 2 years' time, the range will be better, the costs of delivering will be better. The huge premium that the manufacturers are charging will start to decline. So I don't see electric buses. It's all about for small operators, and it's for small operators of every business, dentists, doctors, vets, all kinds of things. Does the government regulation make it too difficult to actually run a small business? And that's the real crunch.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I suppose my mind sort of came to it because I realised that, say, in Coventry, which of course is going to be an electric bus city, and I've realised that I think that every route running in or into Coventry, apart from just one, is currently operated by one of the major, well, by three of the major groups. So I wonder whether operators are, smaller operators are being put off.
Well, I'm sure they are. If you've got to go and buy an electric bus, 360,000 quid, and again, the problem is, if you go through the Zebra grant, we're now looking at small buses for Leicester. So, we've got to start thinking about them now, but we're not going to see them until 2025. Well, there's a fat lot of use if you want to go for a tender. So the system has to change. The government perhaps could leasing schemes, where they could just be leased out and a stock availability. There's lots of ways that it could be improved, probably beyond the brain power of the current government and the DFT. But none of these things are insuperable. If they want to keep private operators, they actually need to talk to private operators and find out why the numbers have gone down and how they could encourage things. Because without competition from private operators, these new large companies are going to stuff local authorities and the government with costs. We're seeing with vehicles at the moment, there are effectively only two suppliers.
Indeed. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Of course, adding on to that, the franchising in quotes system doesn't really cater for the small operators, despite being specifically designed to do so. So the future in the conurbations, if you like, is pretty grim, I think.
They're doomed, absolutely doomed.
Yeah, there you go. That's worse, Peter.
But
Thomas, good evening,
outside,
Thomas. Oh, sorry.
Outside the conurbations, there are plenty of opportunities.
Surely, yeah.
As we are showing. We've now got 350 buses spread over, the North Midlands.
No, it's a great example, exactly. Right. Thomas, your turn has come.
Thank you. Hello, Julian. Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. I'm just picking up on your comment about you see no reason why municipals shouldn't sort of spring up again. I wouldn't totally agree with that from the point of view, I can remember when I was at Lancaster, they disposed of the refuse collection business and put it out to franchise, and it was an acceptance that they would never get it back. The reason being they would not be able to afford to set up the unit again. And the thing against a municipal, certainly in the Shire districts, contemplating setting up their own municipal bus companies is the setting up costs, unless with either this government or change of government, there is going to be a major financial input to help them do it. Now, where would you suppose that finance is going to come from?
Well, look at it in Manchester, money, no object. Everything they're doing in Manchester is going to be expensive, and we'll never know how expensive it's been. But adding in, they've actually spent all the capital costs. The only thing they haven't done in Manchester is employed the drivers. There's nothing else, and that is a zero cost thing. So they've already spent the depots, the vehicles, the ticket machines, complete new 30 million quid of the ticket equipment.
Yes, but that is your metropolitans. But if you're looking more at the Shire districts, it would make such a hole in their overall expenditure. I can't see how they could afford it.
Well, don't forget, you can rent property, you can rent vehicles. It doesn't necessarily have to be a capital item.
True, true.
I mean, I'm definitely for the franchise areas. I don't see why, particularly in Manchester, they've gone 90% of the way. Why not just run the thing themselves? I'm not suggesting that, I mean, I can remember, obviously, we were involved with the takeover of East Staffs. And, the East Staffs Council said to me, why did we ever end up running buses? Because they were too small, far too small. You need to be the Nottingham of this world or Warringtons or Lothians. I don't see that, but the point is, I don't think there should be a prohibition on it.
No, well, I would accept that, because I mean, I'd love to see some more municipals, but it's the practicality that concerns me, if you like.
I mean, don't forget, there are quasi-municipals out there. They're not running public buses, but they're running disabled transport, that kind of thing. And some of those have got 100, 150 buses.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Thomas.
Yes, thank you very much.
Come on, thank you. John, coming back again, John Hardy.
Thank you. Yes, coming back on the earlier point that was raised about elderly persons' concession travel not coming back to the pre-COVID levels. I accept that there is still some fear amongst some people of travelling on buses, but also I think too there is a lack of knowledge about the services, because they've changed so much since COVID. Timetables have changed, routes have changed. They're changing even faster now than they have done before. Most operators have forgotten how to market the service. People just don't know what the service is, and therefore they're giving up travelling.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. I mean, if you take the numbers I quoted for fare-paying passengers, why should senior citizens be any different?
Because they're the ones who generally have less access to modern forms of media, and also they are the ones who, for whom the travel is discretionary.
Well, yeah, it's discretionary and free. I mean, in our case, we print timetables, and the routes I'm quoting are the routes that actually haven't significantly changed. So, I mean, I don't know why we can guess on why people are using the bus less, but we don't know. And what's more, I don't think we can do anything about it.
Yeah, but go on.
No, carry on.
The publicity, it's opened up a whole new can of worms, hasn't it? Publicity. There's an enormous variance between those who do it well, such as Centrebus, and those who don't do it at all. Until somebody bottoms that one out, which I think is a bit behind John's point, really, there's no standard for accessing bus information.
No, I mean, one of the things I've suggested in all the BSIPs we're involved is we need a simple all-operator website for each county with all bus operation in, nothing else, no cycling or walking or other garbage. It just wants to have buses on it. But that just goes over people's heads that because people you're talking to don't understand how buses work, and they don't see it as a priority. It'd be so easy for that to be introduced.
Yeah, but that's I agree. That's a start. What about a county-wide timetable like the one just behind me on my desk from Cornwall?
Well, I mean, I'm not convinced that they're the answer, but what you need is comprehensive area timetables. I mean, that's to me, that doesn't exactly fit in your pocket, does it?
Doesn't, no.
It's not convenient to take round with you. It's all right to have at home. And again, so I mean, I don't think they thought that through. I mean, we go for cheap folders, geographical areas, which to me is what people want. 90% of passengers use one route.
Yeah. And they do literally carry them around with them.
Yeah.
Take your point. Yeah. Yeah. More work needed there, I think. We've got a call from our Sheffield outstation there, Phil. Phil Drake. Unmute, Phil.
Sorry, it was sticking. A couple of vaguely political points. Thomas mentioned the difficulties of municipalities starting up. One of the reasons they can't at the moment is because they're broke. Labour in opposition has made quite a lot of interesting noises about increasing devolution. I think in reality it'll have to increase funding to local authorities somehow. So I can see opportunities a couple of years down the line for that situation changing. The second point, in 86, this country went for a deregulated private enterprise model. It was a complete outlier from really the rest of the civilized world virtually in doing that. And all I'm seeing at the moment is however it's actually run in terms of operation being franchised or whatever out to private operators or contracted out, is that we're returning to a centrally driven, fairly non-commercial model, which is the model across most of Western Europe. And having just spent a week in Germany in Nuremberg, which is the same size as Sheffield, I know which one I prefer.
I'm not sure how I comment on that. I mean, that's a fact. The buses have been a political football in this country since 1986. Mm-hmm. Well, no, since probably 1886. But we are where we are. You don't know what would have happened. I mean, I worked for the National Bus Company. The companies I worked for, with one exception, were an absolute shambles. Passenger numbers were collapsing because of unreliability. I can remember companies like Midland Red who had appalling reliability records, Tatty Fleet, etc., etc. It wasn't good. It's like British Rail. Everybody says British Rail's bad now. Crumbs. What was it like 30 years ago? I think we've got an amazing rail system now. Absolutely amazing. It's as good as anything in Europe. And we could have it buses for not a lot of the costs. But the government needs to sit down and think about a long-term 10-year plan, which is why the railways have done well, because they've always had 7-year funding windows. They've known what they were going to do for the next 7 years.
We shall see.
Indeed, we will.
Thanks, Phil. David Button, please. Unmute. That's right. No, unmute. Whoa. You need to unmute, David. You are now unmuted. Come on.
I unmuted and then I muted itself because I pressed the button. Sorry. Future routes for buses. A lot of the buses are going to the shops and back again. People don't go to the shops anymore. People go elsewhere. People go to work at 3 a.m. at Amazon or wherever. And okay, some of those routes are serviced by some buses, but surely the way people travel now is so different than the way the routes operate that you need to look at your routes. I mean, the bus operators need to look at their routes and say, why aren't people going on that one? Where should we go instead?
Obviously, there are changes. I mean, when I started, there were lots of 3-shift things going to coal mines and steelworks and things, and they all disappeared. Now we're back to 3 shifts with Amazon and other warehouses. I mean, we've got plenty of buses going out of the depot at 4:15 in the morning now to do Amazon work. So it's all there. It's mainly contracted. It's not a public thing because obviously, I mean, particularly with the labour shortages, that a lot of warehouses are keen to ensure that they've got proper things for their staff. But the rest of the day, people are still going to the same hospitals, the same town centres. We're never going to get buses to be the prime mover in out of town shopping centres because they were designed for the car, and that they're just not designed for buses. But while we do have to change, I don't think it's that as fundamental as you suggest.
That's my fingers snapped. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Unmute, please.
Good evening.
Go ahead, go on.
Just a minor point. You were saying about timetables, like you got that Cornwall edition. North Yorkshire have done a halfway house, which is very handy. It's a pocket-sized leaflet for all the services going to each town. Like there's one for everything that goes in and out of Richmond, one for everything that goes in and out of Northallerton, etc. Whichever company it is, and that's much handier.
I agree. I mean, that's a cheap and cheerful. I mean, those are going to cost tuppence or threepence each to do.
Yes, well, I keep one of each in my bag when I go out. It's very, very handy.
So, you know, all the PLCs who stop printing timetables, in my view, are absolutely crackers.
Yeah, great illustration, Chris. Well done. Copy to Staffordshire, please, if you don't mind. Next on the queue, Martin Lester.
Hello there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can't see
Yes,
you, but we
good.
can hear you. Yeah, go on.
It's my first time using it, so I just wanted to check.
Well done.
Okay.
Welcome.
What seems to be increasing pots of money now going from the DFT to local transport authorities? They're going to have sort of like more and more wielding power over where buses run. The problem there is the county boundary and the loss of cross-border routes. One of the routes that you withdrew was the 19 from Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire to Nottingham. And surprise, surprise, Leicestershire put a replacement route on to the last village before the border, and Nottinghamshire did a route from the first village on the other side of the border to West Bridgeford. They even stopped from going into Nottingham and stopped in the last place in Nottinghamshire. So what a surprise there. But I mean, it doesn't behold well because county boundaries have become Berlin walls. And it's just, is there an answer to this?
Yes, there is an answer to it. I mean, as I think I said earlier, local authorities are not the right people to do transport. I mean, poor old Rutland, you know, where every bus route goes into another county, they've got no hope of, you know, they try hard, but how can you run a bus network in Rutland when other counties have different policies? It's a ludicrous system and we need to change it.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any, if you were to have regional transport authorities rather than county-based, would that partially solve that problem?
I think, I mean, if you look at Transport for Wales, and I wouldn't hold them up as a wonderful organisation because they appear to be incredibly bureaucratic, very slow, and in favour of trains. But you know, they've created the Trawes-Cambria network, which is slowly expanding, and I mean, the interurban links in Wales are now very good. So yes, I think you need some kind of overarching transport authority, which is not directly connected to politicians, which is TfW's problem. I mean, I've been looking recently at TransLink in Northern Ireland, where it's obviously got political control, but it's much further away.
Yeah. And I'm in Rutland, by the way, so poor me. Okay, thank you.
Really good. Any other questions out there? Come on, somebody. Looks like we're drying up. We're exhausted, I think, Julian. Right, let me give another chance to anybody. Anybody out there? Yes, that's good. Instant success. David Conway.
Good evening, Julian. I suppose just to follow on from that piece, and with my colleague, the commercial director, also watching this as well, would you suggest that those of us who are in Wales running municipal bus operators at the moment are more or less in trouble than those still attempting to run buses in England, given the propensity of the Welsh government to mess around with everything and its bureaucratic levels?
Well, that's a bit difficult for me to say because I don't really understand. I mean, I keep hearing that bus funding's ending, and then it seems to be ending in April 2024. And then, of course, you've got the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. which we haven't got in England yet, but we're bound to get it in the next couple of years because, you know, politicians think all these things are a good idea. I really can't say. I mean, I think you've you know, in at least in England, the funding pot is not directly shared with rail, but I mean, I understand that they're only £250 million short on the electrification around the Cardiff area, and they're going to spend that, and so buses in Carmarthenshire and places are going to get cut as a result. They've certainly got no real policy. That's what it appears to me, and you know, it's the same short-term thing, and somehow we need to get a balance, certainly between rail and bus. I mean, I don't know what the proportion of bus to rail passengers in Wales is, but it's probably something like 3 or 4 to 1. I don't know.
Something like that. And this is where I will now be in trouble because Gareth knows that statistic and puts it into my head every day. But we do know the fact it's something like that. The amount of funding for rail is something like £7 a passenger versus 33p per bus passenger across Wales. So yes, that's the difficulty we find ourselves in.
Yeah. And, you know, unfortunately, the trouble is with rail, once they've built it or done it, they're stuck with it. And, yeah, you know, unless the passenger numbers in Wales increase significantly, their subsidy cost is going to go through the roof.
Yes, and given it's an economy that relies on probably more government jobs, I would suggest, than anywhere else. And all those government jobs have been told to work from home, and massive buildings are empty. Yes, they've created their own problem for not only their rail and ourselves. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Every sympathy for the position over there, obviously. Right, and HST's just come into view, which must be Kenny Barclay, surely. Thank you, Kenny.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Good to see you, Julian. Yes, apologies, I missed the start of your presentation, trying to salvage what we have left of the railway in Scotland. Just be interested to know your thoughts. I stay in a village just outside Inverness, 12 miles from Inverness. We have a sporadic bus service, maybe 5 departures a day in and out of town. I work part-time for the company that provide it, small independent operator, and I make use of that from time to time, but I don't use it every day. I still drive. Why do I drive when I get free travel on a train? A bus into work. Where is the priorities for the likes of my route? The fares are high. Do we reduce fares? The timetable's not very frequent. There's no bus priority, so it actually takes me longer. Where's the incentive for me to spend 15 minutes walking to the bottom of my road for a bus that comes every sort of 3 hours, that's going to cost me for a 12-mile journey, if I did pay for it, £8 return? You know, I struggle to, even with free travel, justify it. Where do you see the priorities? Would it be priorities for the buses to overtake the cars and get there sooner? The cost of it? Do we do something reducing that? The comfort of the vehicle? Where do you think the bus industry need to look to change the tide?
Buses are an increasingly expensive thing to provide, and therefore, frankly, they need to be concentrated where there are passengers. So, you know, I'm afraid your village route is doomed, in my view. It is rural buses. I mean, when I started 40 years ago, there were plenty of farmhands living in houses in the middle of nowhere. But certainly in England, and you know, I won't say it's the same in Scotland. If you live in most rural areas, you've got a valuable house, and you will certainly have a car, and therefore you don't need a bus. And if you are reliant on a bus, I hate to say it, but you need to move to a town. You know, we cannot provide as a society something for everybody, and transport's one of them. But you know, I mean, for instance, we've got DRT everywhere, which is the most crackpot idea, absolutely crackpot. They'd be far better going to somebody like Uber and getting some cheap, you know, some kind of taxi pass, because Uber can provide it far more comprehensively and far cheaper than a bus. It's the lack of vision, really, that government and local authorities have. You know, it's horses for courses. Buses are expensive things.
Yes,
and we should be concentrating where the passengers are. I mean, one of the interesting things, and it's happened throughout my career is when passengers were going down, the good routes go down less than the poorer routes. That's what happened. And now the good routes are going up faster than the poorer routes because they've got the frequency, etc., etc.
Yeah, so you're almost saying that we really shouldn't almost waste time trying to grow these routes, almost just let them fizzle out.
Indeed, but in time, if buses become more, but if there's more priorities for the buses in bigger towns and more people use them, then adding in an extension to a small town outside will become far more, and then it can be part of the city service, etc., etc. It's an incremental thing. If we can get into an upward spiral of patronage, then lots of things are possible.
Yeah, so based on that, really what we're saying is the priority, bus priority, and reducing, being more competitive car is the winning streak there, really. Passengers aren't so much worried about whether it's a leather seat, whether they've got Wi-Fi on the bus. It's more, if I can get that bus and it's going to get to me to work quicker than sitting in a queue of cars each day, that's where we could potentially win back.
In the 40 odd years I've been doing this, the simple thing is reliability. Everything else is irrelevant. If it's not reliable, doesn't matter what else you do, people are not going to use it because their car is effectively reliable as long as it starts in the morning. And now cars basically always do start in the morning. So, and so many companies don't understand that. When you go for reliability, I mean, in Milton Keynes, I effectively acquired what must have been the worst bus service in the country. It was running 85% of its mileage with Merck 608s. Over time, we went to 709s, then to Solos, then to Scanias. We got the reliability right because the timetables were right, the staff were better motivated. And if you can get in that upward cycle, you can then start increasing frequencies. The fares didn't go up as much as inflation. And once you're on that cycle, things become quite possible.
Yeah.
And, I mean, in my own company, in certain areas, we now seem in 12 months to be on that cycle. What will happen over the next 12 months, I don't know. But if we can, I mean, if we've effectively increased our passengers over 12 months by 20%, that's on unchanged services. If we have another 20%, we're going to have to start increasing frequencies and things because we're going to run out of capacity. And then that hopefully will start encouraging more passengers.
Yeah. And good luck with your 20s. Highland Council have just introduced 20 mile an hour everywhere, and we're now at the ridiculous stage where bikes are going past cars through villages. Seriously, it's
I can see it. I mean, the couple of times I've driven in London recently with the 20 mile an hour limit, I mean, it's just a nightmare, absolute nightmare. But it's going to come. It is going to come.
Yep. Best of luck every day.
Thanks, Kenny. Good to hear from you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Treasurer Jim, over to you, Jim Froggatt.
Hello, thank you, Julian. On the subject of regional authorities, you may recall that the boundary between the East and the West Midlands runs between Burton and Swat, which was one of your busiest routes when you were at Stevens. I think a lot of the other points that I was going to make, I was going to ask about your opinion of the existing tendered services systems and whether tendered services are going to continue to decrease through lack of money and also through lack of passengers. I think you partly answered that question to the last questioner, but more specifically to England, probably.
Well, I mean, tendered services is going to increase dramatically because they've got lots more money. The big problem is the interface between the tendered network, because the tendered network won't be rural rubbish anymore. It's going to be increasing frequencies on regular services. How that's going to mesh with the commercial network.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Okay, Jim. Go ahead.
It's Derek Jones again. I've
sorry.
put a couple of comments on the chat section, but I don't think anybody else has seen them. So I'll just sort of raise them live. On the point about not knowing what the cause of reduced bus use since COVID is. I think there's recognition, certainly in Kent, that some of it's down to greater home working because we had a lot of commuters going up to London a lot of the time, and that's reduced. And there's also more online shopping, which must be the case everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think there are certain types of travel which are reduced anyway, whether it's car or bus. But certainly in Kent, there are more cars on the road than there were before. So I'm not sure that's the whole picture. But that's certainly part of the pattern. On the point about 20 mile per hour limits, I used to live in Portsmouth, where we had those introduced very early on. And as long as it's kept to where there's narrow residential streets, I think it can work. It's only when you try and put it on the main urban highways that it does start to become a problem.
Thanks, Derek. Any questions out there? Okay, I think we're coming to a natural conclusion. One just aside from me, this money from HS2. What's your view? Is it ever likely to appear in the bus industry anywhere?
Well, I mean, don't forget we've already got 150 million allocated for 24-25.
Mm.
I mean, I actually see that the Prime Minister's announcement is the first time the rail industry have basically been told that they're not having any more toys. I mean, it always staggered me that the rail industry manages to double the number of passengers over 20 years, whether you've got basically a fixed cost industry, and also increases its subsidy, which is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it should have reduced its subsidy considerably because the number of train miles hasn't doubled, and the tracks, it's the same, basically the same track. So, you know, inefficiencies are there somewhere. I mean, nobody can tell you how much a railway line makes or loses, which has always amazed me. Somebody must know, and if they don't, they bloody well ought to find out. But no, I actually think finally there has been a realization that basically the rail industry is subsidy junkies and they need to do something else. And I think the bus has got a good boost now. And if we can get passenger numbers up and prove that the money is going to be spent well, I think there's a very good future.
Yeah,
with thousands of caveats like the driver situation, the 20 mile an hour limit, etc., etc.
Yeah, as we've listed tonight, in fact, and it also needs people who can actually design networks, doesn't it, and so on. And not
yes,
quite many of those about.
That is another very fundamental problem.
Yeah,
I mean, the standard of transport consultants, I mean, I've never had much to do with them, but with BSIPs, they're everywhere and they are hopeless, absolutely hopeless, as are most consultants by the looks of it. You know, you've only got to look at HS2.
Yeah, quite.
How much does a kilometre of railway cost? You know, this year, next year, the year after. I mean, the stories that are coming out of HS2 now are just horrifying.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's all sorts. Right, I've just got one last one to go then. Martin Lester coming back. Quickly, Martin.
Yes, hello there. Coach services, everybody bangs on about integrated transport, but it's all a bit of a myth. But the coach services that run in across the country really just duplicate the rail network. And really, shouldn't we be trying to regulate so that coaches can fill in the gap to take us across country from one mainline station to another? It's something we seem to have lost.
Well, I mean, it's partly, has been mentioned by other people about, you know, everything's done by counties, county boundaries, but Berlin Wall. And I mentioned about Transport for Wales, who have created a Welsh network. But no, I don't think coaches should be relegated to feeders for the railways. I mean, you only got to look at the unreliability, the strikes, etc., etc. I mean,
no, I meant in addition, really, rather than instead of. But anyway.
Yeah, but coach travel is booming at the moment, absolutely booming for numerous reasons. It's cheaper, it's more reliable, it hasn't got strikes on it. No, I don't think you should. I mean, if you know, unfortunately, the number of cross-country routes, you know, that National Express and associated motorways people used to run has reduced, but that's simply because there isn't a demand for them. And to be fair to both of the, well, in fact, all three coach operators, they're forever trying new things. And of course, the railways don't serve the airports that well, which has been a huge market for coaches. So, I mean, the coach market, to me, it needs to be well left alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Martin, I think that's a fair comment. I mean, it's interesting to see in Germany and France, I think, where it's actually gone the opposite way. It was very highly regulated to the point of extinction almost in some places in those
Well,
two.
it was prohibited.
No, it's not. No, it's booming. Strange.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Kenny, have you popped up again? No, you haven't. That's okay. You've got delete your hand. Kenny's raised his hand. Okay, fine. Sorry, I'm getting confused.
My apologies. I should
think
that,
so. Yeah.
lower that hand. Lower that hand.
Thanks, Kenny. Okay, that brings us to a close. As expected, I think we've had a highly entertaining session, Julian. There's obviously room for another one. And you'll be the one to time that, because obviously you've got some revelations to come, which we'll all be looking forward to. So we'll keep in touch on that one. I think, gentlemen, we need to show our appreciation for Julian for all his time and effort in the usual way, please. That's very good of you. Thank you. Again, thank you, Julian. Just to sign off then, on behalf of the Midland branch of the OS, hope you've all enjoyed our speaker meeting. I'm proposing to hold another one in perhaps January sometime. That won't be you, Julian. So
no, it won't.
So don't worry too much. Full details will be available, of course, in the OS website and indeed on the OS Midland Bulletin. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully in January we'll get another topical speaker in. So without any more ado, repeated thanks to Julian. Thanks to you members for joining us, and good night, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Julian.
Cheers all.
Cheers, Julian.